I know we are past already katikati ya mwezi, but
no,
Happy New Year.
It's New Year.
Is it too late? No. Professor Alfred Omenya, urban development expert and also governance analyst. Karibu sana. Very good morning, Prof.
Thank you. Good morning.
Welcome back to AM Live after some hiatus.
Yes.
All right, so let's
Glad
begin with a look at what's in the dailies. We'll begin with the Daily Nation, and this resonated across some of the other dailies as well. I can see also on the Standard. I'll be taking a look at that in a moment. A cheating nation. This is actually stemming from a report that was released yesterday by the government. So this new government survey, according to the Nation, has exposed the extent of extramarital affairs in Kenya, revealing that men have an average of 7 sexual partners in their lifetime, while women have 2. The report also details trends in sexual behavior in the counties in the past 12 months, showing how the reckless behavior could be fueling the spread of sexually transmitted infections, including that of HIV. Percentages of men and women who had 2 partners in the past 12 months, you have a number, top 5 counties: Narok, Migori, Elgeyo Marakwet, West Pokot, Embu. Top 5 counties for women, you have Murang'a, Kericho, Busia, Kiambu, Bungoma. It's a very extensive report there on the Standard. In fact, State of the Nation, the good, bad and ugly, that demographic survey on the Nation, on the Standard, they're also talking about the issue of the cheating, average numbers of sexual partners among the men and women, HIV testing, 47% of women and 39% of men tested in the last 12 months of survey. You also have the issue of gender-based violence, physical violence against women declining from 20% in 2014 to 16% in 2022. And also there are matters of land ownership there and vaccination as well. Wakili Dunstan, so this is interesting. It's actually a very extensive report we've seen from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Study unearthing shocking truth about widespread infidelity. Should we be having that conversation as a nation? Because we're looking at the issue of the spread of HIV and AIDS and the kind of work that the country has done to be able to manage and curb the spread of HIV among the population. So should we be concerned?
Very much concerned, because many of the Kenyans and many of the people tend to hide from reality. What the country is discussing about is the reality on the ground. It is us. It's not any other people, no foreigners. It's how have we transited from the traditional way of looking at things to what we are today, and the projections of how society is going to live. Globally, effect of globalization is now being felt in this country. The reality that a human being is not a static human being. Value systems are continuously evolving. As a lawyer, I'll tell you, the law equally evolves. So we are looking at, the problem I have is that people are comparing and calling the new norm as infidelity. Infidelity will be infidelity when you contextualize that if the majority of Kenyans are doing it, then that is a norm. The few aged and there are few analog who see life from that, how life was, are completely different. On the question of HIV infection, it's no longer really a big issue. Cancer becomes the greatest threat to the Kenyans as we are seated here. HIV, with the ARVs being present, really is a slow type of sickness. Unlike cancer, unlike road accidents, unlike domestic violence, which is now the cause of the majority of murder issues. So, but I totally agree with the media, and I totally agree with the survey that
this is a conversation.
This is a conversation that we can never run away from. Originally, the conversation about condoms, the conversation about contraceptives, the issues about family planning matters was a discussion nobody, no media house, no newspaper, no parent, no relative could talk about. Today, it forms 80% of the discussions on TV, on newspapers, on boardrooms, on sitting rooms. So the society is opening up that this is us, and this is us, and this is us. We can never run away from ourselves.
All right. Now, before I get to you, Prof, of course, also joining us in studio is Vincent Kimosop, a governance expert this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, Vincent, and Happy New Year. We just began the conversation, but I said, yeah, we're already halfway mid-month, but Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and Happy New Year to my
Happy New Year, Kim.
Karibu sana, Bwana Vincent, to the studio. But let me get to Prof. Alfred Omenya. I want to get your thoughts on this particular report that has certainly dominated most of the headlines this morning. What do you think about this conversation?
I think, Zainab, the conversation, as Maria said, is a conversation that we must have.
Right.
Yeah, I think...
we cannot escape it.
Yeah, we cannot really escape it, and it's a more complex conversation. In fact, we're talking about sex, sexuality, and health. And it's a global conversation as much as it's a local conversation. We know just a few days ago, there's been a lot of conversation about the LGBT community. Yes. Now we're talking about conversations around, you know, HIV and AIDS. Then we're talking about conversations about multiple sexual partners, as it actually were. We are a society that is inserted in global realities, and the nature of our governance and governance systems comes with a whole raft of freedoms that may be positive, but on the other hand, may assault, you know, the way society is organized and our norms and cultures and values and so on. It would be stupid to put our heads in the sand and assume none of these are happening. In fact, the headlines are interesting. A cheating nation already you know, highlights a position that it's actually wrong to have more than multiple partners. And yet the report is saying that's the reality. So will we actually regulate morality and say, you know, sex between two consenting adults is immoral or even illegal? Yes, I think
so. This is a quite tricky subject.
These are pertinent conversations that we must have. I know this is a subject that we run away from. You remember, Zainab, when there was the issue about sex education in schools. We again ran away from that and said, look here, we are actually, you know, introducing our children to sex, you know, at a very early age. And yet, on the other hand, we know in reality, we have a lot of underage pregnancies in this nation. Yes, I think if you look at it, whichever way you look at it, whether you look at it from a health perspective, whether you look at it from a cultural perspective, whether you look at it from global discourses, some I had to write in a bid that our firm is putting, that our firm does not discriminate against gays, lesbians, and those sort of things. So this is becoming a reality, and I think the more we engage in this debate with open-mindedness, the better. And I like it that this is actually, the statistics is coming from Kenya Bureau of Statistics, basically saying that these sort of statistics and demographics are very, very useful for us going forward, and even as we shape our policy. All right.
Vincent, I want to get your thoughts as well from this report, but also there are quite, you know, progressive issues that have also come out from that. According to the survey, for instance, 1 in 4 persons in Kenya right now, 26% females, 27% males, have some form of health insurance, you know, underlining the access to healthcare quality in the country. So this is quite interesting. What are your thoughts on the whole issue?
I think, first of all, I want to say that you know, the areas of expertise that when I speak with authority.
Yes, of course. I can imagine you're definitely not a health expert.
This is not one of the areas of expertise. But I just want to say that the KDHS is usually a tool that is used by the Ministry of Health for planning, so that the public policy interventions are informed by evidence. I'm happy to say that, of course, YHS, the headline has taken the direction it has gone, that there are still also very important pieces of information in the KDHS that we should not lose focus on. For example, information around planning, information about access to healthcare, the whole issue around insurance that you've also pointed out. And also, you know, we devolved healthcare 10 years ago as a result of the constitution that currently governs the country. And some of its data is very helpful to shape our conversations. What are we getting right? What is it that we need to improve on? So I think for me, for example, you have part of the things that the information pointed out clearly that the Kenyan family is shrinking. So from a planning perspective, because you need this data, so when we are doing roads, when we are doing, when we are allocating resources, we are in the month of January. As you know very well that the budget making process is currently ongoing. Right. Where we then will ask ourselves, are we taking our shillings to speak to the needs that the country should be addressing? Right. We have invested heavily, for example, in the past 10 years in doing a lot of roads, in doing the hardware of development. Is it time we actually examine ourselves? Could it be that the problem really is in our software? I think alongside this, we've also had a lot of data, a lot of reports, for example, in some parts of our country, issues to do with violence, domestic violence. So it helps us to say, hey, beyond the socio-economic issues that are emerging, are there things that we need to check? Because development is not just the hardware. Development is when both the software are going hand in hand with the hardware, so that the whole complete person is taken care of in all areas and in all shapes. All right, fantastic. So I'm just going to peruse through these pages to get to the next report, which is Kenya's fertility rate is dropping. The survey says there has been a 50% decline globally in the past 70 years. That trend has been endorsed by the demographic experts as one that is positive for the country's health outcome. Also, this is quite a big issue now. The health survey also finds that 85% of women and 73% of men have undergone HIV testing in the past 12 months. However, according to that data, many Kenyan youth do not know how to prevent against HIV infection, and nearly half of the Kenyan teenagers aged between 15 and 17 years do not know how to protect themselves against HIV and AIDS infection. This coming after last year's World AIDS Day report showing that the country had recorded an increase in new HIV infections from 32,000 to 34,000 for the first time in a decade. All right, moving to this other issue, which is education, before we take a break. So the ministry has dropped the plan to abolish boarding schools. The Ministry of Education has rescinded its plan to abolish the boarding schools for grades 1 to 9 beginning this academic year. However, boarding secondary schools that are still running under the 844 system have been encouraged to introduce day wings to accommodate more students. The Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Mashogu allaying fears that the government would abolish boarding arrangements for junior secondary schools, and this they did put in place some of these areas where the families would say, you know, our students and pupils are walking long distances to go to school, so they were given that opportunity, and it has rescinded that particular decision. Wakili, what do you think of that decision by the government? And basically just looking at where we are in terms of the implementation of the curriculum and some of the challenges facing the education sector right now.
Systemic and systemic challenges of any startup, whether business, whether a change of government policy, those are teething problems. The change of the curriculum from 844 to the new curriculum will have its own small issues. What I'm happy about the government is receptive to the data that is coming from the ground. What they say that the ground is different means that government is listening. What the policy they make, can it work? It can't work. They review that. If we had a government that was a boardroom government that says this thing must be dealt with, a policy has been spelled out. So I think the CS, CS Machogu and PS Belio are doing a fantastic job in trying to accommodate to the realities. Two, the economic realities of setting up infrastructure to accommodate students is quite very expensive, time consuming for it to be actualized. So the realization that now that CBC is domiciled in the lower primary school, the realization that teachers need to be put in place, whether they are called interns or what, the instructors, TSC is trying to run with that question. Three, the realization that we are moving away from COVID when the school calendar completely collapsed. And now we are starting a new calendar this month that will be the normal calendar we know from January to December. That is a new dawn again we have. We have the political transition from the Uhuru-led government to the Ruto-led government. That has also an impact on that. There were challenges for the CDF that now has been resolved. So there was a shortfall in terms of finances, and also the question about boarding parents. We are looking at young kids. Are young kids going to be away from their parents? The formative stages of childcare demands that a child grows within our family. And that is international laws all over, plus the constitution and local laws. But the reality is, do those schools that are neighboring, who are supposed to be day schools, have the capacity, the quality to provide quality education as per the expectations of the parents and as per the needs of that child? So those are the really issues that we are having. That when we talk about boarding school, we're also looking at the question of removing children from their parents for a very long time. It reached a point where kids who are supposed to go to class 1, parents are taking them to boarding. You get kids who are 6 years, already they have been put in boarding. The also big issue of parents running away from their children. We saw it during COVID. Parents were saying they don't want the children at home, not because they want those children to go to study, but the children have become a menace. Most parents are not able. The question of parenting is a very, very critical issue that is coming up. And the expenditure aspect. Do families have the capacity to retain children at home and feed them? Or they are saying, because government provides for free meals in school, let the children. There are quite a number of issues, and that's I'm happy that the CS Machogu and the SPS and the technocrats at the ministry are listening to the voices of the consumers of the policies that they are coming up
on the reforms within the sector. All right, so before I continue with Prof and Vincent, we have to take a break, but when we come back, we will be delving into perhaps what is one of the biggest issues from yesterday's event. Well, there was a plot to abduct, kill Chebukati. Ruto says this is an assertion that, an allegation that the president made yesterday. He says the assassination plan was sanctioned at the highest state offices from the previous administration. We're going to get to that in a moment. Also, changes IBC wants before the 2027 polls. We'll also be delving much more on this particular issue. The commissioner's stamp just ended yesterday, so we do have some vacancies there. What does that portend for the country? We'll be coming back to look at that. And also the Business Daily Treasury plots 300% stamp tax hike on alcohol, makeup. Those are just some of the products that the Treasury is targeting on this issue. All right, so let's take a very quick break here on AM Live. Remember, you can always use the hashtag on our Twitter handle.